So my name is Maurice Mulvenna. I'm from Ulster University, as is Professor Mark Shavlin, and I'm so grateful and pleased to Sung-Yi and the whole team from Yonsei who have invited us here to Seoul. It's my second time here. I was here in 1996, and it's changed a little bit since then from my memory. So thank you for the invite. I first heard about this opportunity when Mark and Thanos and Phil said they were going and they could really help for someone to help carry their bags. And so I offered to do that. And then they said I would be able to present as well. So this is really a kind of a light entertainment. After the four previous speakers, including Professor Kim, that was a wonderful lecture, and thank you. I'm going to be talking about something much simpler in a sense. It's a very grand, long title, Behavioral Insights from Machine Learning of Digital Event Log Data. But you could put it another way. If you're using a smartphone, as some of you are doing right now, and if there were 1 million of you using an app on a smartphone, could we understand something about the behavior of those people? Could we use machine learning to identify aggregate patterns of behavior? Of course, not in a Big Brother sense, although that can be done, but could we do that in a public health care sense or in a way to learn about characteristic behaviors? So that's what I'm hoping to talk about in the next 30 minutes. I'm contextualizing it from COVID, from the pandemic, and also in the context of digital mental health. So we're thinking about devices that we use to support our mental health, usually smartphones. I'm going to be talking about one of the problems in this, which is engagement. So, you know, you're of the age that maybe you're using Snapchat or TikTok, and you're totally engaged with those kind of apps, or maybe in Korea you have different apps, but they're well used and very popular. But some of the issues with mental health apps is, does engagement continue, or do people drop off in using them? And then I've got a few slides that have lots of colors and complexity, but I won't dwell on them long, just to introduce the concept of digital phenotyping, which is the broader framework in which event logging or understanding behavior from data resides, as led by Professor John Torres in Harvard University. And then a couple of case studies just to color it in. One of them led by a professor of nursing in Ulster University, Assumpta Ryan. And then I've got 4 slides on large language models, which are actually synonymous with the final slides on LLMs as clients or psychiatrists in counseling. So setting the context then, pre-2020, digital health was a thing, digital mental health was a thing, but some apps were more popular than others. But with COVID, it became a very big thing, and this is the UK usage of digital health apps as gathered by Orca, which is a company that the National Health Service in the UK uses to analyse or to validate apps for use by people. Mark was talking earlier about this idea of socially prescribing. So rather than a pharmacological intervention, a tablet for depression, you would be given a prescription to go for a walk a dog or whatever. Similarly, you could be given a prescription to use an app. And we see that from the outset of the virus in the UK around the middle of March, people were looking for apps that related to respiratory conditions and so on. Then it quickly moved from July, September to mental health. And then whenever people realized that sitting at home and eating cupcakes and drinking too much beer or whatever caused problems for diet and fitness, that these were the kind of apps that were used. But you can see in the middle of this heat map, that's mental health. So it's consistently strong. It's really the most popular types of apps that were being used by the population in the UK related to mental health. So that's what COVID changed. And we see this backed up by people like Becky Inkster in the UK, where there was a great increase in anxiety and depression. We see all kinds of nuances of this. University students maybe had more depression than anxiety. So it manifests itself differently depending on the situation people found themselves in. Also loneliness and so on. So there was more support needed, but people couldn't meet face to face. So digital kind of crept in there. And then article here from John Torres talking about bending the curve. So he saw this as an opportunity to actually use technology to support people. So he's a big advocate for digital mental health for all kinds, not just for mild anxiety, depression or whatever, but for schizophrenia and all kinds of serious mental illness. So that's the context, and people moved online in therapy, talking therapy sessions to just seamlessly, just as we did in the universities, taking our classes or taking classes, using sometimes with great difficulty online learning environments, and nowadays people in talking therapy sessions are offered face-to-face or online. So with this opportunity, so a lot of scaffolding around what makes digital work happened because of COVID, or what COVID was a catalyst for it. So some good maybe came out of it if you're an advocate of digital. So did digital work at all? So this is the WOBOT RCT. Note, it only was a 2-week RCT, and this was a talking therapy chatbot. The outcome is measured with PHQ-9, and we can see that over the 2 weeks it was it had a significant impact. There's a new paper out now on TherapyBot, which I think is a 4-week RCT, but it's the same kind of thing, very polished, short trial, strong evidence, and seems to be an optimistic indicator of the use of these kind of interventions. However, so let's so that's COVID and how powerful it can be, arguably. What is digital mental health, and how can we articulate it and in the most simple way? Well, it's sometimes in thinking about person-centered approach, it's allowing people to keep a record. Some of you, I'm sure, are using mindfulness apps and apps where you can jot down notes about yourself and journal keeping and so on. And these can be done in conjunction with therapists and so on. And then the use of the technology, the sort of video calling layer, and then this layer that's was coming along, quite traditionally, use of AI, machine learning, and then LLMs appeared, so this is already out of date, from like a few years ago. But the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to help automate and improve the quality of care. So we know that if we're using an online service like Amazon or whatever you use here, it's using personalization for a commercial gain for them, but also for your benefit. It's found something that you might like and you actually buy it, so you have liked it. So it's positioning things in the shop window. But why can't we do that kind of personalization in healthcare? In terms of the service provision, why can't it be personalized in the same way that it is in commerce? And if it could, then it could be much more efficacious. We heard Thanos talked about personalization in the eStairs support. So so there's your mindfulness journal reminder. So despite all of these apps in app libraries, in the example here with the UK, just under a third actually meet the ORCA quality benchmark. So there's a lot of bad apps out there, yet there are a lot of people who have poor mental health who are seeking interventions that can support them and so on. So that can be a bit of a problem. The pros and cons of these kinds of interventions, we've talked to a lot of people about what they think they are, and some information here from the literature. They are highly scalable, so if you get it right, you can roll it out. They can be 24/7 anonymous access, just like some of the helplines are. So there are very few barriers to entry. They allow you, starting to think as a data scientist, they allow you to use ecological momentary assessment, patient reporting outcome measures, and event logs, so that in using the device, your fingerprint or your telltale record of where you've gone and what you've done is recorded and then ethically put up into the cloud anonymously so that it can be analysed. It may know your gender, your age or whatever, but it doesn't know who you are. Things against it, the lack of engagement, the lack of personalisation, lack of cultural adaptations and so on and so forth. Great dropout rates. With digital interventions, digital trials, there seems to be these issues. And that may point to why Therabot and Wobot have very short RCTs, because they can't really risk trying them in a real world duration environment. And just on the issue of engagement and retention, Günter Eisenbach, who's the chief editor of the JMIR series of journals, I'm sure many of you are publishing in, talks about the law of attrition. Any e-health trial, a substantial proportion, many more than normally. So this lack of face-to-face contact or physical engagement in a traditional trial causes issues. And if we look at the barriers to virtual care, we can see that, alluding to the chat we had at lunchtime, we were talking about digital literacy. This is the biggest barrier. So if the person's digital literacy is poor, then that's going to affect their use of these kind of devices. And lack of internet, they have cost concerns, which is an issue as well, and so on. We work our way down those. But it's really about the digital literacy, which is related to age as well, which can cause problems for digital interventions for older people. So the issue is user retention. And this, from Baumol, talks about the exponential drop-off in the use of digital health apps, 5 days. Now, we could talk about apps, mental health apps, for quite a long time. What's their purpose? If I go to a psychiatrist or a talking therapist, counselor, clinical psychologist like Thanos, and we have, it's mild anxiety or whatever, and it's probably 6 sessions, maybe more if it was more serious or whatever. Depends on the funding model available and so on. But after that, he'll maybe use an outcome measure and I'll be fine. Maybe I'll relapse or whatever, but I'm normally fine. So it's the dose that you get. And maybe there is something about the digital app. You have an intervention. It's designed to help you. It helps you and you don't use it anymore. But that's not really the case. We're seeing people disengaging from digital before it has an effect. But it's difficult to measure this because they've disengaged. However, so there are lots of questions about that, and this is a very active research area. And some of the work by Boucher and Recker is really helpful here, because it's saying that people are talking about engagement and adherence, and they mean different things, and it's wrong to assume that more frequent engagement is the best, that you're using it all the time, that over a sustained period of time, and that stopping to use it is a failure. It may well be, but we don't know. So we need much more research in how people engage with or disengage or fail to engage with digital apps to understand this. And they have their own recommendations to define success as some degree of improvement in the condition. And that is just difficult with digital as well. So if you look at some other work from Weingarten et al., they talk about the frequency of use and duration of use, and you have those different quadrants. And, is this what we're looking for? Is it really high frequency, high duration use? Is that what success looks like? And clearly from the other slide previously, it's not that. So we need to think about the metrics we're using and how we measure success. So we're using digital apps, we're engaging with them or not. But digital apps are on our smartphones, and our smartphones are called smartphones because they are smart in that they have lots of sensors in them. How many radios are there in a smartphone? Mark? Okay, more than 2. There are maybe 5, 7 radios doing all kinds of things. That's why your phone has all of these little lines around it to keep all the radio antennae separate for GPS and for the different frequencies of the phone usage and so on. Stuff I don't understand. But they gather all kinds of data from accelerometers. They know where you are. They know how fast your sedentary movements. They can measure how much you're standing up, sitting down. If you're using smart watches as well, then they can measure all kinds of things like your blood oxygen levels and so on. So this era of ubiquitous computing allows the growth of this concept of, well, if we have all of these readings, we can assemble a kind of a phenotype, equivalent to a genetic phenotype, but a digital phenotype that fingerprints the behavior of this person for use in their diagnosis or whatever. Some work here, I'm not going to spend much time in these slides at all, but you can see that there's a very strong line of ticks along the middle using apps on your phone where you self-document your mood and stress. But you can also use heart rate variability from your smartwatch, which is correlated with stress. So we could use, that would be a passive use with your phone. It's not even on this table. So there are a lot of passive and active and wearables and so on that you can use, and they can collect data along a lot of different areas, and some are more frequent than others. You can see in this literature. And then, so we have masses of data. We can then think, well, how will we analyze them? And of course, nowadays we would just say to ChatGPT, could you please analyze these data using the most appropriate machine learning algorithm, and it would probably do a good job. I've gotten as far as using a ChatGPT and given it instructions to use some clustering algorithms with mixed success. But in machine learning traditionally, we can do things like classification or regression, boosting, reducing the dimensions, using principal component analysis, and so on. Again, you see a smattering of use of these across the literature from this scoping review from 2022. And, things like decision trees are seen as good because they're explicable. You have a visual decision tree with a set of rules, really, pictured in the branches of the tree as you navigate through them. And some others are not as good as explaining themselves. So we've got the data which includes the event logs that I'm going to be showing in the case studies, and then we can use machine learning to try and make sense of them. These are here just for fun, just to show you that we can drill down into a great number of areas here in terms of mental health. This is a different taxonomy across depression, anxiety, bipolar, suicide, stress, general, and so on. So people are trying to use this digital phenotyping in all kinds of areas. We know from the research that, suicide prediction using machine learning from data is just not feasible for many different reasons. But people are still trying and exploring it. So those are taxonomies, and then what you can use, wearables and so on. And then from the same paper, this is the data. Now it's impossible to read that, so I've kind of jazzed them up. These are the different areas, or zoomed them up, so we can see that the data can be audio, can be interview, can be questionnaires, can be scales, video, and so on. Then we're down into the raw data, whether it's heart rate or app usage and so on. And these are the headings along the top, just exploded up as well. So you can see this is a bit more detailed than the previous review. It's a systematic literature review from 2025, so it's bang up to date. So how someone speaks. We've done research with a PhD recently in vocal biomarker analysis using deep neural nets, 62% accuracy. So the company that we used as a source the algorithm from for that, use it for older people for Alzheimer detection, which has a higher accuracy up in the low 80s. And here then we're drilling down further in here. This is the taxonomy in particular areas. This is particular diseases and so on, and they're really here just to show you how complicated it can get. And this is about behavioral and profiling and digital phenotypes in mental health. And then finally, treatment response prediction, trajectory identification, exploratory data analysis. So I'm trying to design these slides for nursing academics and students, undergrad and postgrad, so that you could see there's a big complex world out there, which I think you know about anyway. But from the computing science side, there's a lot that we can use. And sometimes the difficulty then is deciding, well, what way will we go? What's the best way to go? What's the most efficient way? What's the most cost effective in terms of the technology stack that we should use? So that can be very, very difficult. Anyway, case studies. The first case study is led by Sumter Ryan, professor of nursing, interdisciplinary team, and we looked at can we have an iPad-based reminiscence app that supports a person living with dementia at home and their care family member normally to reminisce. And we've seen that it's not quite a therapeutic benefit, but it's seen sometimes as that. But it's an activity that can often take the person back or allow them to speak about memories and so on. It's seen as something very positive. So I won't spend much time on the app itself, just to show you this is, kind of videos, and that's me. And you can have ecological momentary assessment as well. There's Mark's friend Noel singing. You can have photos as well. So you can do all kinds of things, and you can get feedback on how much Mark enjoyed looking at Noel playing or singing or whatever. But the data that goes up into the cloud from people using the app then gives you these insights. So you can see that photos on the top left graph are by far the most popular material that people are reminiscing with. And then you can see this characteristic bottom left behavior where, without digital, you wouldn't know that people were reminiscing at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and so on. So you're getting insights. This is real world data, as it's known. So it's very helpful, very useful. But then we can do some simple machine learning here with k-means clustering. And we've identified some clusters here. So there's 4 clusters, and we can give them names. It's a bit like marketing. You feel like a marketer. Double income, no kids yet, or not in my backyard, or whatever the NIMBY is. So you can come up with labels that help people understand, and these are the archetypal behavior types, the archetypal clusters. Or the behavioral archetypes would be the better way to put it. So you get typical user, and the typical user is 43% of the data of the users is like this, and then you get, these hooked adapter user. In this data set, it was only one person. This was from the pilot study as opposed to the app that I showed you working there. And then you can get your box plots of the different clusters, and you can see what is it about the cluster that makes it different. That helps you name it and so on. We found this is quite a really strong co-production technique. So you can go back in an interdisciplinary team, and the nursing people on the team understand. We can use that as a way to communicate, and then also with more broader with funders and with charities who engage with people with dementia, helps people understand that there are groups of people who use the technology in a different way. You can also analyze the ecological momentary assessment questions and see, well, when are they answered most or less? You can see the dismissal rates. When are they dismissed more? So for this study, a Tuesday evening at about 7 was the best time to ask an ecological momentary assessment question, because the fewest dismissals. So I'm whizzing through that because I have 5 minutes left. The second case study has a video. I won't play it all, but just to show you, we did a video and to introduce the concept to you. Anyway, so we engaged with mental health professionals in 4 countries in Europe, and the clients of many of those professionals, and we co-designed a digital mental health chatbot. And it was based upon, we surveyed the people about a year before we built the app. We surveyed people across these 4 countries, and we thought everyone would hate the idea. These were mental health professionals. These are people like Thanos and people who use talking therapy and just love to, it's a therapeutic alliance. And we thought, well, these people will just hate the whole idea of digital health apps. And we were astounded, frankly, and quite pleased, because we found that if you look at the blue and the green, these are the sum and significant potential answers. So they thought it, overwhelmingly, they liked self-management. They thought it would be really good for self-management, a chatbot. They thought it would be very good for education, also training, also counselling, everything except diagnosis. You can understand that. I don't think they were being protective of their own, area. I think they were just saying, well, this is a very difficult thing, hard to do. Human beings disagree and get it wrong as well. But that was astounding. And so we, if you watch the video in full, we built the app and then did a study on it. This is what it looked like. And so just like a chat interface. We had about 350 participants, and that generated a lot of interactions over the 12 weeks. This is the outcome measures we use at Warwick Edinburgh, satisfaction with life, Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale, WHO5, and satisfaction with life scale. And you kind of see, well, the Warwick Edinburgh is kind of going up and dipping a little, but it's generally going up. The other 2 is going up. But if you look at the end numbers, they're falling off a cliff. So we're going from, on the Warwick Edinburgh, 275 to 37 to 19. So despite designing our study such that the fall-off was minimum, we lost a lot of people. And this is, Eisenbach's law of attrition. The main outcome was that participants showed a small improvement in mental well-being, although it wasn't statistically significant. So our old friend, the exponential drop-off, struck again. But we saw the same kind of graph here as we saw with the people living with dementia. Some usage in the wee small hours, and then a peak, and then people go and have their lunch, drops off, and then and so on. So you get this kind of similar behavior. It's just like website usage behavior, which is interesting in itself. We did some clustering on these data, and we found that there were 3 clusters, and the names, the doom-laden names, say it all. The 81% of cluster was the abandoning users, and then there was the frequent transient users at 2%, and then the sporadic users. So, going back to, what is good, it's something to do with good engagement. It doesn't have to be sustained, but there should be engagement. It shouldn't just be people jumping off the ship really early on and not coming back. However, what we did find was that from the analysis was that treat yourself like a friend and relax, were the highest areas up there, and sadly the very lowest one there was how to help someone. More interestingly here, from the 30,000 interactions, we used some association rule mining, and we could see that what was co-associated here. So soothing touch was co-associated with treat yourself like a friend, and with relax, and so on. So there were some strong co-associations, so people found those things useful together. So that was very helpful. We thought, well, if we were designing something again, we've learned a lot from this study. So that's the second study. There's a toolkit here on how to create something. It doesn't tell you how to create something that has good engagement, but it tells you how to create something, and it may be helpful to you in research. And in the -1 minute that I have left, apologies, just to move into the large language model sphere. This is very recent research. It's still in archive press from Wang et al. Here, talking about the idea of, which was covered by Professor Kim there, the idea of a LLM simulating the role of a client or a patient here. And so they've done some work on that, and we have done some work on this, but we haven't, formalized it and measured it and so on. And in their work, they have a cognitive model of the patient, so you can kind of tick certain things that you want it to have, just like in some of his slides, and then it builds up the cognitive model from the interaction. So it's kind of playing the role of a client as an LLM. And then the other work that's relevant to this is Role Play Do by Louis et al., where it actually processes the patient's, the LLM generated initial responses and rewrites them based upon a set of rules in the LLM, such that the new response is better, more appropriate for a trainee psychologist to assess. So it's kind of like a distillation of what a good client, good in that per mental health of a particular type, would be. So we're just starting to do that, but nothing like the previous speaker, or I'm sure the next 2 speakers. So that's me. I hope you found it in some way interesting, relevant, and useful. Thank you very much.